Hi, my name is Dan Gomez, and this is Mental Health Super Omnia. Mental health above all. We identify and understand mental health issues and the paths for help. Today, we want to talk about the challenges, the pitfalls, and the path forward when dealing with disordered eating in the holidays. Very stressful time for many of us. We have three guests with us today. First, Kathryn Lodwick-Jones. Kathryn is the lead of the Equilibria Eating Disorder Center of Excellence. She's a licensed professional counselor, also a board-certified dance movement therapist with years of experience supporting children through adults. Next, we have Victoria Hecker, also an LPC and a board-certified dance movement therapist. Among other areas, Victoria specializes in working with adults with various concerns, including but not limited to eating disorders, disordered eating patterns, substance abuse, anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, food-related trauma, and various life stressors. Finally, we have Sarah Wittman. Sarah is an LPC who specializes in addressing a wide range of mental health disorders, including addictions, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, grief and loss, and stress and management. Kathryn, I'd kind of like to jump right in here. And I want to say, when I think about the holidays and disordered eating, I really think about three things. One, increased stress. Two, food traditions. And three, social pressure. Now, increased stress because you're dealing with people, family dynamics, friends, sometimes people you don't even know, changes in routine, and travel, which in and of itself obviously is very stressful. Food traditions, we all know. Social pressure, hey, I can already hear it. Oh, it's okay to overeat. It's okay to eat sweets because I'm going to start a diet on January 1. What's your take on those issues? And are there others that are more important?
Yeah, I think you really highlight a lot of the main stressors that I think a lot of folks with eating disorder histories face. And I think even just the general population, regardless of your relationship to food. The holidays are stressful because it does involve all those things you listed. And I also think it's an opportunity to kind of explore different ways to better manage them. I mean, take, for instance, dealing with people is stressful, but there's also an opportunity to learn how to better manage your relationships to take some of the stress away and set different expectations around food. I think too, I'd love to talk about a little bit more about some of the comments that you shared at the end there. I'm trying to remember exactly what you brought in, Dan, but just comments on, I've quote, it's okay to overeat or it's okay to eat sweets. And
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to acknowledge the harm that comes from anyone commenting on what you're eating or what you're not eating or how you're eating or how much you're eating. I think we live in a culture that really normalizes that with oftentimes attempted positive intention. But even if you don't have disordered eating patterns or eating disorder history, can be really harmful to suggest that the way that someone is eating or what they're eating, like I mentioned before, is problematic or needs to change or coming from a place of judgment.
I'm even thinking with that, just this idea of, right, like I'm going into the holidays and I'm going to be overeating, or it's okay to be eating those sweets, and all of the prep work that people do ahead of time, right? We know that we're going to be having these big meals, that there's going to be lots of sweet treats, and just thinking ahead, how much exercise do I need to be doing each week? What should my diet look like right now to prepare for those meals, as opposed to just letting ourselves go into the holidays. And when we're hearing those comments from other people of the prep work that we're doing, knowing that we're going to be overeating, for any of us that are in eating disorder recovery or just trying to be more mindful of letting ourselves eat, hearing those comments and then thinking, is it bad that I'm not prepping? Is it bad that I'm not doing all of these different measures to make sure that I am prepared for the meals that I'm going to be eating?
With that piece of preparing, I was also thinking about clothing, for example. Like when people are trying to think about what outfit am I going to wear for this Thanksgiving event, for example, or this dinner, or this family gathering, there's also these concerns of, will someone make a comment about my body or the changes that have happened since I last saw them maybe a year ago. Within the clothing aspect, it's normal for our stomachs to expand while we're eating. Our body needs to digest food. We also want to be comfortable too. So that challenging part of, can we physically be comfortable while we're mentally uncomfortable or high anxiety, is a hard balance and a lot to think about too.
You brought in this piece about preparing, Sarah, and I was thinking about both the value in preparing for the holidays, but also sometimes the harm in over preparing, and how challenging it can be to be really present, whether that's being present with eating food when you have a disordered eating history, but also maybe you are in a really great place with your recovery and you're so ready to enjoy your family's home cooking, and you're kind of bracing yourself, or you find yourself unprepared for Aunt Cece's really inappropriate comment about you're eating so much, or why aren't you eating this, or you don't seem to be enjoying my casserole, why are you being so disrespectful? And just navigating both this sensory overload of being at an intense meal relationally, but also the food, right? It's a really intense time. And I appreciate the clothing piece, Victoria, because oftentimes holiday food is really starchy and can make us feel bloated, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can be really uncomfortable. No matter how many mashed potatoes you eat, we all have kind of felt kind of heavier in our guts. And adding to that discomfort can both be really triggering, but also just make it hard to be present.
Yeah, and it definitely, I mean, it makes us think, again, like just going into the holidays and what should we be wearing? What should we be eating? And I think, Kathryn, with that idea of waiting to hear those comments from other people, and it's so interesting because it's these holidays where we know that there's going to be this amazing food and we know that we want to be eating it, but then there's going to be a comment one way or another, right? You're either eating too much or you're not eating enough. And there's inherently a problem within that. So we can never even know, right? What am I supposed to be eating, right? In quotations around supposed to be eating, as opposed to just letting ourselves engage with it. And Victoria, with the clothing comment, right? Wearing an outfit that we just feel comfortable in, knowing I'm going to eat what I want to eat when I show up at this dinner table, and not having to worry of, do I have to wear the outfit that my family member is going to make a positive comment on? Or are they going to make a negative comment if I'm wearing something that's a little bit more stretchy or oversized? Because, right, I want to eat the mashed potatoes and I want to enjoy myself and feel comfortable throughout the entire night.
Thinking of this thing of like that over preparing, or how that can cause even more anxiety, and there's already so much pressure with the holidays. And Kathryn, when you were sharing, I was also thinking about, for some people who have been in recovery for a minute and this is their first holiday or gathering time, that they're feeling like, all right, this is the real time that where we test out all of these skills, and that pressure that comes with, all right, well, what if I do binge or restrict or purge or engage in eating disorder behavior? The shame and guilt that also comes with this preparing. And then if something doesn't happen the way that we prepared, how much we can beat ourselves up with it.
Mm-hmm. I think you bring in
When I think
Go
about
ahead, Dan.
When I think about the Thanksgiving holiday, I think about the number of people that show up. We probably are going to have 25 people. Now, luckily, they stopped showing up at our house. Now they're going to show up at my son's house. But nevertheless, you have people that, maybe are newly married that are showing up. You have different eating traditions, different food traditions. Sometimes people bring different things. Doesn't that make it more difficult? I mean, I'm not somebody that you would have normally had any meals with or Thanksgiving with, and all of a sudden I'm there, or somebody's there that you don't really know, and now you're having to deal with them and the way they're talking, or the way they're talking about joining a gym on January 1, or not wanting to drink alcohol, because when I drink alcohol, I just eat more. doesn't that cause problems in that social dynamic?
I feel like when we have different people coming in, or there are different, styles of what we're eating, how we're kind of talking about food and our bodies, there's a level of expectation that we can't always have, right? If we have our that traditional family, right, our immediate family, we typically know what we're going into, right? We know which aunt is going to make those comments and which uncle's going to say this and that. But if we're bringing new dynamics in, we can't prepare, right? And I think that that's something that's so important to kind of acknowledge too, of the importance of being able to just show up feeling comfortable enough within ourselves, within what we want to eat, and not being so worried of what somebody else going to say, what are the comments that they're going to make. We can always have, again, like a level of expectation that somebody is going to say something. That is the society that we live in. And then it's just looking at what are the boundaries that I need to have in place for myself if and when those comments come up.
I do think that when there's such a large number of people, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that's not in any way implying that someone's definitely going to say something horrific. But when you have so many people, you simply can't, you individually yourself, keep track of everybody and everything that they're going through. We're inherently going to say something accidentally, unintentionally inappropriate. And I think in some ways that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of the person with the eating disorder history, and that they can acknowledge everybody has their own narrative of me. I'm going to hopefully doubt that anyone's purposely trying to say something purposely rude to me. Nothing's really personal here. There's so many people. There's a lot of hubbub. I can focus on taking care of myself. And now that they're 15 cousins rather than 2, there's more of a likelihood that there's an uncomfortable conversation, but they probably don't know half of what's going on. And I'm just going to kind of find a way to get through that moment. I think when you're just so many people, it's easier to necessarily be a wallflower unless you want to, but just focus on, this is so many people, so many experiences. Let's kind of adjust our expectations.
Sarah, you had said comfortable enough, which I think is a really big piece that to highlight for a second of, there's 15 cousins compared to 4 or a small amount. It's going to be uncomfortable, where there's going to be people that we don't know. But it's like, all right, it's not going to feel 100% comfortable. But are there things that do feel comfortable? Like there's your favorite dish is there, or someone who you're comfortable with, or you're wearing something comfortable. There's these little aspects that provide some comfort, comfortable enough, safe enough, but it doesn't need to be 100%. It might not be 100%.
Yeah, and I think having, again, like those expectations of what's the dish that I'm really excited for, or even like, who is my point person at this dinner table, right? I might know everyone here. I might know half of the people here. Who's the person that I can turn to if I'm not feeling comfortable, or if I'm really struggling with setting a boundary, maintaining a boundary, feeling like I can take that next scoop of mashed potatoes, that they can look at me and just reassure me, you're okay, right? I'm here with you, and we're going to be comfortable enough together.
Maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's a dog. Maybe it's an animal. Like maybe it's that there's a dog at your feet begging for food, but they're looking at you with unconditional love and support.
Yes.
Or maybe it's someone that you're texting or can step away and have a quick call with. They might not physically be in the space, but to have them easily accessible.
Yeah, I love both the idea of the point being, whether person or animal, the point being, and also moments of respite, whether it's making a phone call or please volunteer to take the dog for a walk, or even just I'll start the dishwasher if you really want to be helpful. But just taking a moment away for yourself. I mean, I would imagine if you're at Dan's house and there's like 80 people, that might be really hard. There's probably a line for the bathroom, but just find a place, just find a couple minutes for yourself, because no matter who you are, being in a room for the holidays with 80 people is a lot. That's a lot to manage and experience.
I love that piece of stepping away to start the dishwasher or something. Like I'm
Yes.
imagining if you're in a conversation with all 14 or a bunch of cousins, let's say, or 14 cousins, like we had said earlier, and it gets uncomfortable. And then you see someone going to the kitchen, like, oh, wait, I need to go help so-and-so with this, or, oh, I noticed this, to kind of excuse yourself to walk away.
And I think that gets to be such a good technique to utilize, especially if we're dealing with family members that we haven't seen in a while, or just we're bringing in people that we don't necessarily know. Just having that permission of, we always have an out. If somebody's making that comment about ourselves, our body, how much we're eating, or they're just making a lot of comments on what they're eating or the goals that they're going to be creating within the new year. And if we don't want to listen to it, it's not making us feel good to be engaged in those conversations. And we don't know that person well enough to maybe set the boundary in person. We get up and excuse ourselves from the table. We can start the dishwasher. We can walk the dog. We can go call that friend.
I think it's easy to feel stuck or confronted in an uncomfortable conversation, particularly if someone has sought you out to catch up or is trying to ask you questions. And I think kind of the benefit of a larger gathering around the holidays is that you do have that built-in out of, oh, I'm going to go help this person in the kitchen, or, oh, shoot, I told grandma I was going to make sure the pie didn't burn. And then you disappear for 20 minutes and gather yourself and figure out what your game plan is. You are not out somewhere where you are trapped to have this conversation. It's not a job interview. You can make yourself useful and give yourself a break in that time too. Yeah, don't let the pie burn at all costs.
So when I think about that holiday gathering, though, I mean, we have, in my family, we obviously have lots of people. We have lots of kids, I have lots of kids, but we have lots of grandkids that show up. Probably half of the crew are, under the age of 15. So you end up with kid comments. I mean, you'd expect some oddball uncle or oddball aunt to say something, obnoxious to you, perhaps, but you probably aren't expecting it out of a kid. But I find kids sometimes just pop out with stuff that you just aren't expecting. So what are you going to do about that?
I mean, I think I would be curious if that's hearing a child making a comment about somebody else that you think is inappropriate, or if it's to you. I think there might be a different response to either. And I think kids are really curious. When they see something that they're not familiar with, they oftentimes have a lot of questions. And sometimes, in my experience, kids make statements that are supposed to be questions, but it's just, they don't have a filter, right? They're like, I see this thing that I don't understand, and I'm just going to kind of spew what I'm seeing. And the adult around me is supposed to kind of fill in the information to answer this question, which can be really funny and also really uncomfortable if you're kind of the recipient of that really not intended to be, but hurtful comment. I think being able to just model everybody has different needs and experiences, right? Whether the child's commenting on someone's body or food or behaviors, just saying, oh, well, maybe this person's needs are different than what you've seen before, or they make their casserole differently. I know that's not your preference, but that's something that you really like. Or all bodies change. Your body's growing. How can we kind of explore that probably away from this person so they're not uncomfortable? But I think there's also value in kind of modeling. We talk about this. This isn't something to make the person feel shamed about.
I'm thinking too with that, Kathryn, that being able to give a response that's neutral too, because I feel like so often when we're dealing with kids, and if we believe that they made an inappropriate comment, right, and they're going into asking this question, but it comes across as a criticism or something shameful, we can be so quick to say, we don't ask people that, or let's not talk about that. As opposed to, right, if a kid at the dinner table says, why did you get a second plate of food? Just being able to say, I was hungry, right? Or maybe they were hungry. Being able to say an answer that's more neutral that reminds the child it's okay to be curious about these things. It's okay to ask certain questions. And it's not a bad thing if somebody got another plate of food. It's not a bad thing if your cousin's body changed from last year to this year.
Yeah, and I don't know is always a totally reasonable answer. I think that can be neutrality too. Like, I, as an adult, am accepting that I don't know. And I think sometimes also models, that's not my business. Let's move on and connect with the person in a more appropriate way.
That big piece of like shame, like not necessarily tying shame to the child asking the question, but also shame to the other person who might have been the recipient of that or overheard that too. And I love that piece of, I'm not really sure. And yeah, being honest, like, I'm not sure what's happened. Like, I don't know why.
You and Brian, Dan, a little bit earlier, I wanted to loop back to this. Family pressure. And I guess I wanted to kind of loop in less ambiguous family pressure, but more maybe cultural expectations, whether it is around religious expectations or family traditions or generational pressures. And I think that can be really particularly challenging to navigate with disordered eating history. Whether you want to align with your family's expectation or not, oftentimes it can be a challenging topic to bring up, and oftentimes you don't want to bring it up, but the expectation of the conversation is imposed on you. And I think that that's a unique challenge that often isn't talked about and can instill a lot of shame.
I'm even thinking for myself, I'm pescatarian, so I don't eat turkey for the past 10 years, right? And the expectation is that on Thanksgiving, we're going to sit down and eat turkey. So even being able to come into those conversations of, I'm going to have a different dish, right? Other people here get to have the turkey, any sides that they want. My food is going to be more modified to meet with the needs that I want for myself, right? For my own moral reasons of being pescatarian, but not just going with the flow of what is the norm, what is expected for a Thanksgiving meal.
I'm even thinking about if someone is in recovery and maybe they identify with their therapist and their dietitian that actually turkey is a fear food and I am not ready to have that exposure yet. And so maybe someone's plate does look different, or maybe they do have a boost or an ensure, like a supplement with their meal. And that reminder of our plates can look different. We all have different preferences. We all have different needs. Like Kathryn, you had said a little earlier, like those needs. And normalizing it is that everyone's plate does not need to look the same. And everyone doesn't need to eat the same thing.
You know, Sarah, I'm vegan, been vegan for many years now. So, you know, Thanksgiving, sometimes people will make a vegan dish for me. Many times we'll just bring a vegan dish that can be shared with others. I find people are more and more accepting of that, but occasionally you'll end up with somebody who does talk about, you know, why aren't you turkey or why aren't you eating this? But if it's somebody that's younger, I usually look for a vegetable that I can just reach over, get a spoonful of and put it on their plate, because I'm pretty sure they don't want that vegetable. And usually that'll like everybody will laugh and kind of like change the topic there just a little bit. But Kathryn, you brought up culture, and I think that that's an important thing, because some of us came from cultures, particularly where our grandmothers would feed us until we literally pushed away from the table. Okay, like you had to push away the table. You can't just sit here and say, oh no, I'm full, because they're just going to put more on your plate. You literally have to get up, and that's just the way it is. That's the culture. So I don't know if any of you have come from that, but I'm sure you've worked with people that have had that come from families that have that culture and have that issue at the holidays. So it has to be a little bit more difficult, particularly if you have an issue or have disordered eating things that you're trying to work through.
I'm thinking about in times that if it's someone's offering you food, it's then disrespectful to turn it down too, for some people. And I grew up in a very big family, and that you're constantly having food. And something that we started years ago was, all right, let's take a break from this and let's go play some games, like some board games. It's having something to kind of break it up. We're not turning down the food because we know that it's always there. You can come back to it. And that's something that I sometimes remind clients of whenever they're like, well, I don't want to say no. But I'll say, hey, I really appreciate you offering it to me, and I'm going to take a break for a second. Just this, and then maybe you get up and go somewhere else, or kind of break up the day a little bit to where it's not constantly just eating food all day. There is some variety throughout the day.
And Victoria, I think that even with the cultural, societal pressure of, I can't turn food down, right? If somebody made it, if somebody bought it, who am I to say no to it? And this is where, I mean, for anybody that has dietary restrictions, if we're talking about allergies or anything, that gives us an excuse to say, I don't eat bread, I don't eat gluten, I don't eat dairy, I don't eat meat. But we don't need an excuse to turn down food. And we can just say, thank you so much for making that. I'm not interested. We get to walk away from it. And we don't have to do it in a way that's disrespectful or that's mean, but also kind of being able to maintain that we're responsible for ourselves, our boundaries, our feelings. If somebody takes it in a way that feels disrespectful, that feels mean to them, we know that that wasn't our intention, right? We wanted a break from eating, right? Or we didn't want to eat that thing, but we did want to try that other thing.
I think it can be so challenging when there is that conflict between physical health, whether it's a dietary restriction that someone doesn't understand, right? I'm lactose intolerant. I do 100% want to eat the Christmas pudding. And if I do, I will be so ill. It's not good for my health. And that's no disrespect to who's made this. It's just, I have to set the boundaries so I don't go to the hospital. That's not a Merry Christmas for anyone. And I think it can be challenging when the family member, there's this conflict of maybe not understanding or respecting your own limits because there is such a big value. And I'm thinking of a client in particular many years ago who's Jewish, and she wasn't able to fast because she had a restrictive eating history. And luckily her family was very understanding and supported her, but she had a really hard time coming to terms with, how do I practice my observance when it could potentially kill me? And we were able to work through, well, what is your value here? What can you work through that is safe and also important to you? And I think when you can have that conversation with loved ones about, I see that this is so important to you to share your food with me. And it's not that I'm trying to be rude to you. I want to eat your food. How can we kind of meet in the middle? Without maybe sharing all the reasons you can't eat the food, which you totally don't have to, but your health is what you have to advocate for.
Yeah, and I know.
Please go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, within Jewish tradition, right, within fasting on Yom Kippur, it's so important that we look at, is there any health concerns going on? Is somebody pregnant? We want to take those factors into consideration. Is somebody in recovery from an eating disorder? Because anything that's going to go against our individual health, it's not worth it, right? And there might be some people that don't understand that, but it always comes back to, why am I choosing to do this or not to do this? And again, even if something is outside of our health, right? Even if we're not lactose intolerant, but we just don't want that pudding, it's okay. We don't have to eat it.
You know, you guys have been great about talking a little bit about, talking about finding somebody that you can use as support at a family event, or even potentially having a plan. But I also read about identifying one's triggers. What is that about specifically? And if I identified a trigger, what am I supposed to do about it? Give me an example, because I don't really get it. And if somebody in my family meal is doing that, how do I spot it so I don't do something stupid here?
To me, when I'm thinking of triggers, it's words that people are saying, right? It's those conversations that we know that somebody might bring up, even knowing, depending on what I wear, back to that conversation. If I wear something that's tighter, is somebody going to make this comment? If I wear something that's oversized, is somebody going to make that comment? So being able to ahead of time kind of notice, just as we're going throughout our day-to-day lives, what are certain things that people say? What are those body comments that individuals mention? Or again, these goals that somebody might have as we're getting to the new year. How does it feel within my body? Or do I find myself tensing up? Do I find my heart racing? My palms are sweating? And if we can know what they are, and we know, again, right, my aunt always says that thing, or my grandmother, my grandfather, whoever it might be, can we maybe have conversations with them ahead of time? I'm not really comfortable with being commented on my outfit today or my body today, with what food I'm eating. I would appreciate if we could steer clear from that. Or even just knowing, again, right, all these tactics of being able to just get up, walk away, make sure that the pie is not burning, what friend that we need to be reaching out to get away from those conversations, because we don't have to sit in triggering situations if we're not comfortable.
And if you can't escape, I know that's like something that I navigate a lot with people of like, there is no escape. I can't get up. Or maybe they're in freeze mode. Their nervous system is like freaking out. It's like, right, is there a mantra you can tell yourself? Or is there something tactical that you can ground yourself with? We can't avoid triggers. Like Sarah, you were saying that those sensations that come up with your body, those little like warning signs. What are those warning signs? How can we support them? What do they need in that moment? And can we use those too?
I appreciate that you both brought in strategies for the person who might be triggered. And I was thinking of not the opposite, but the flip side of how can I, as a loved one, support a person? And I think oftentimes therapy speak gets overutilized out of context. And there's this like terror of, oh no, what if I trigger someone? And I think it's more than trying to avoid upsetting someone and about being really thoughtful about how we connect with people, especially during the holidays when there's heightened emotions and less control over the environment. And having a conversation with your loved one, whether they're in recovery or not, about, are there some topics that you would like to avoid having? Or are there, even being an ally, right? You know, Aunt Susie's coming, and I know she oftentimes says these things. How would you like me, if at all, to support you if I notice that she's maybe not being super helpful in the situation? Or is there a safe food or something available that I can make for you if you're uncomfortable or feeling triggered? Whether it's you're going to be the dog walker, no one else gets to walk the dog, you're going to do it. And if that means you are walking the dog every 20 minutes, I know what you're doing and I support you, and that's your thing. Or there's a private room for you. I think just thinking ahead for honestly anyone's benefit. They might like a task to get away from family, but really being just curious with the person and saying, how can I support you during this chaotic time?
Kathryn, you made me think about, and I think Dan, you had said this, like, all right, if someone else makes a comment, how do I not make a comment too? But what if there's the flip side? What if I do make a comment that triggers or activates someone? I think our first instinct is to be like, oh no, I'm so sorry, I did it, that's not what I meant. Can there also be like an acknowledgement of it? Hey, I recognize that I made this comment and I apologize. And maybe you don't know what to, you don't know other language. You might ask like, all right, what could be a better way to talk about this? Or, you know, like owning taking accountability, there we go, of the comment and how can we learn from it. We are human, we make mistakes sometimes too. So it's like, how can we recognize when we might have caused some harm and maybe don't recognize it until later on? And is there a repair that might happen too?
And I think for those family members, the person who they might have harmed or made a comment to, if that person's not ready to talk about it, don't push it. Like in the back closet during Thanksgiving is not the time for repair. Waiting for the person to be ready to revisit the conversation, just kind of de-escalating the situation, I think is so much more valuable than trying to have this whole hashed out conversation. It just is maybe not the most effective.
And I'm thinking too with that, I mean, for everyone, Kathryn, going back to what you were saying of being that ally, right? That it's 2025, right? Like we know that there are so many body image issues, eating disorders that are rampant. So just coming into these meals, into these celebrations with that level of mindfulness. And then, as we know, Victoria, like you said, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to slip up, or we're going to make that comment that we maybe didn't mean to intentionally hurt somebody, but it did. So when we do, how do we address that? How can we, again, kind of come back to that neutral stance as opposed to overly apologizing, but just, oh, wow, I heard that. I can understand how that would come across and how that would make somebody feel. And then seeing, is there that space in that moment or at a different point for that repair and for that continued learning and growth?
I think sometimes it's about kind of slowing things down, whether it's the stress of the cooking and the cleaning and the preparing, or so many people, we oftentimes are in an accelerated state. And then we're more likely to say something that we don't mean, or something that we're thinking and don't mean to say. And being able to take accountability by just pausing and saying, oh, I didn't mean to say that. I want to reflect on this and come back, or I apologize and I want to talk about this later and figure out how I can better support you. Just kind of acknowledging how you responded, and not, you don't necessarily have to do anything immediately, but just taking that pause, I think, can be so helpful, because we're all heightened. Even if it's out of joy and excitement, there's so much of a higher chance that something stressful or inappropriate or unintentional is going to happen.
Do you find that people need a neutral party to talk to more frequently during the holidays, whether it's a spouse or a therapist or a minister or someone, or is that just one more added stress that you just can't fit in a busy holiday season?
I think having that support throughout, I mean, obviously the entire year, but especially within those holiday times. And I know as therapists, right, we can kind of see this influx of clients right before the holidays, and then people tend to take their breaks and then they come back full force. But that to me gets to be the time of, how do we prepare? And not preparing with what are we going to wear, how are we going to exercise, how are we going to diet, but what are the ways that we can set those boundaries, that we can figure out how to best show up for ourselves within these holiday times. But then making sure, right, we've had these conversations of having that friend that we can call, having that support person that is sitting right next to us, whose hand we can squeeze when we're at the dinner table and we're feeling uncomfortable. And utilizing those supports as that outlet, as that sounding board of, just help me to regulate if I'm not feeling okay, if the discomfort is feeling way too much. And it's not meant to be this extra pressure of having somebody to reach out to, having somebody to check in with. It's there for our benefit.
We definitely see an influx in both client attendance and kind of intake outreach during the holiday season. And I think it's really valuable to have already established a relationship with support, whether it's a therapist or anyone in your community or network, so that they know the full picture of things to support you more effectively through the ups and downs of the holiday season. Not to say that seeking support instantly in the midst of it isn't helpful, but coming from a grounded preparation space, riding that wave rather than kind of throwing everything at the person hoping to get support, usually you don't get as much out of it as you would have if you already had the support in the first place.
And then it's like when there might be this break where people are like, oh, it's the holidays, I'm not going to see anyone. I like to remind people of these are the hours I'm going to be in office still. And if you do need a session, I'm available. If I'm out of office, I will provide resources that you might need for an emergency. So it's like reminding people that we are still here, even if you're going to skip the next few sessions because it might align on things that you're already busy with, but we can always move it around too.
You know, it's funny when you guys are talking about this stress and other people and things people might say. I find it every once in a while you run into somebody who has stress because they can't be around certain foods, right? They literally in their home will ban a certain food because they eat too much of it. Okay, I mean, many of us have been guilty of banning certain foods every once in a while, whether that's appropriate or inappropriate. I know that I've done it. But in that family eating or friend eating situation, there's almost always food there that you may not like, may not appreciate that other people are eating, or may have a personal problem with. So if that's the case, what are you supposed to do about that?
I think the first thing that's coming to my mind again is what expectations can we have, right? We know typically what's going to be at our family dinners, but if we're really feeling so uncomfortable or worried about certain foods that might be present, is there somebody that we can ask, right? Is there that point person just to say, can you possibly give me a rundown of what foods might be there? Just so we can know what we're walking into and to not limit anything from somebody else. Just because we have a food that might be a trigger food for us, might be kind of on that list of I don't want to interact with it, doesn't mean that other people don't want to interact with it. So if we can have that understanding, that preparation ahead of time of these foods are going to be there, and just making sure, right, Dan, like you had said earlier, if you need to bring your own dish just to make sure that you have something that's safe and comfortable for you to be eating, or being assured that there's going to be sides there, a different entree that might be available for you. And that's, you walk in and you stay focused on the foods that are available and safe for you.
Or if you have oh, sorry, Kathryn.
Yeah,
Or if you have that point person that's there, maybe you ask them, hey, are you able to prepare me a plate? Or are you able to walk up with me and get this? And I've even with some clients, oftentimes sweets is a big one. That's like, oh no, I can't have this. So it's like, all right, can we do some exposures before the holiday of, all right, can we try to have it in your house? And we work on exposures of working to not necessarily binge, or what is it like for it just to be in your house, to build up that tolerance for it as well. Also, I'm so sorry. It sounds like, I don't know if you can hear, the fire alarm is going off and
oh no.
you hear it?
I think that the holidays are a great opportunity to kind of take stock of before and after care plans. So before plan or proactive planning is kind of thinking, what can I do in advance to advocate for myself? Whether it's doing research about the restaurant you're going to, or the culture of the family, or speaking directly with the person saying, these are my needs, what can you accommodate? Kind of getting a lay of the land. In the moment, navigating, I'm in control of my body and what I do and don't consume. How can I show up for myself? Letting myself eat the thing that I want, not forcing myself to eat something that's not helpful or would make me uncomfortable. And then the aftercare is having something at home that does bring you comfort and joy, right? Whether they cannot accommodate your needs the event or not, I think it's nice to come home to something that you can eat. I have a hard time with Italian food because there's hidden cheese and everything. And I'm not going to just not go to my friend's Italian party, but I'm going to come home and eat the full meal after because I know that I won't be sick and I will have had a great time with my friends. So I think just thinking ahead, but also adjusting your expectations is really important.
It's interesting, Kathryn, that you even said that, because I do that. I will, I have no problem in, being social out with people with stuff that I don't eat. But I will always make sure that I have something I can come home to. If I don't get to eat, I can eat comfortably at home, not a big deal, and kind of go from there. Take a look at everything that we've talked about in the, in the last 50 minutes and think about, what's the one thing that each of you want to summarize or you want to make sure gets said about the holidays and about the stress and the potential, if you have eating disorders, how you're going to deal with that, or even if you have anxiety, dealing with that. And you can have anxiety, social anxiety, or even food anxiety. Well, what's the one thing that you want to make sure we all know, or you want to summarize for us? So I'm going to ask you each in turn, and to give Victoria, to give you and Sarah a break, I'm going to ask Kathryn first. So Kathryn, give me one thing that you want to summarize here, or you want to make sure that you tell us.
Thinking of two, and I want to stick to the one because you only asked for one. But I'm going to bring in a bonus if there's time for my second one. I guess the most important thing to me that I hope that I honed in on is identifying your value and being able to accept there's going to be uncomfortable times, no matter how many boundaries you set or how much of a proactive plan you have. Finding the thing that's important to you and finding ways to sit with the discomfort that comes from things outside of your control, and really holding on to what you want to get out of the meaning of a holiday season for yourself.
Okay. Victoria?
I love that. I was also thinking about how there's this, might be a lot of pressure of don't engage in eating disorder behavior, but it's okay if that does happen. And that reminder, like, you might have prepared all of these things. It doesn't mean that you're a failure, that you might have engaged in something or that you had a panic attack or something like that. It's information for us. And like, all right, can we add support next time, or what can we do differently next time? But it doesn't necessarily mean that a person is a failure.
Okay. Sarah, I have a fish story for you, but I'll let you go first.
I think the big thing for me is, again, being able to come into the holidays with a certain set of expectations so that we're not so overwhelmed when we come to these family or friend gatherings, knowing what food's going to be there, what people are going to be there, and then always knowing we are allowed to set boundaries. We're allowed to excuse ourselves if we need to. We're allowed to redirect conversation if that needs to happen. We're allowed to call people ahead of time and let them know what the boundaries are. Have that space to feel as comfortable enough as we possibly can within these situations that tend to be uncomfortable. And I think, as Kathryn said, having that aftercare plan for ourselves, knowing, again, when boundaries get ignored or they're disrespected, how do we end these evenings with coming home and really being there and being mindful of our needs and our wants?
So, Sarah, has there ever been a fish or a seafood that you couldn't stomach, didn't like?
I can eat all of them.
You eat all of them.
All of them.
Here's my story. Years ago, I was invited to a consular function for a Scandinavian country. I can't remember which one, but when I tell you the name of the fish, people will be able to figure it out. They gave us, it was the holidays, and they gave us this traditional fish, and we could take a little bit if we wanted it. Most people took none of it, but I took this tiny little bit. It's called lutefisk. Have you ever heard of lutefisk?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, they in one of the Scandinavian countries, they take this fish. I can't remember what type of fish it is, they literally bury it and put it in lye. And then like, I don't know, 7 months later, they take it out and then they eat this thing. And I actually took a bite. I took a bite. It was absolutely disgusting. I played with it on my plate for a little while and then set it down. I actually had one of the consular people come over to me and whisper and say that I got extra credit because most people wouldn't even try it, but it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. So I don't think I'd ever make it as a pescatarian if I had to have that food from Scandinavia. But with that, I wanted to try and close. I gave you guys the last word. I wanted to say that our sponsor today is Equilibria Psychological and Consultation Services. It's an insurance-based provider whose mission is to help individuals achieve their personal potential and long-term growth by compassionately and respectfully helping clients live in balance. Visit equilibriapcs.com, equilibriapcs.com. You can look for them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also look for me on Instagram, Daniel J. Gomez 24, and on LinkedIn. Now for the disclaimer. Unlike our three guests today, I am not a medical professional, nor would I recommend Lutefisk, but that's besides the point. I am not providing medical advice. The opinion of our speakers is solely their own. This podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of EPCS Management, LLC.